But let me just begin. There we go. Thank you. So let me begin by just reading what was submitted to us. This person says, I have just completed my master's program to be an administrator for a school, and I was curious what your advice would be on how I can be noticed more during the application process. I've applied to quite a few places and have never heard anything back. So all in all, what would your advice be to any teacher leaders seeking out their first admin jobs? How can I make a name for myself or overcome that hurdle? Continuing, this person says, I'd like to stay close to the district where I already live, and I really struggle with the idea of moving as I have 2 children. My wife and I would like to stay close to this area. It seems AP openings don't always get offered to teachers from the same building, or at least in my experience. And then to continue, this person says, I teach in a suburban middle school and have been a subject area teacher and coach for 8 years. I also help with our professional learning committee. Although we don't have department chairs in our building, I volunteer for our principal's advisory team. I feel like my classroom instruction has been successful, but with my master's degree, I'm ready to try a new path. Should I send my resume directly to superintendents? Do candidates have a better chance if they send letters of inquiry before openings are posted? And then finally, I thought I would submit this question here as a TeleLEAD seems to address experiences from veteran principals who have been down this road before. Any feedback would be appreciated. And then there were some demographics, I think, that were added. Even though I've lived in other states before Oklahoma, I teach at a 5A school with approximately 750 students, grades 9-12. We are a bedroom suburban community with demographics 55 free reduced, majority white, with 35% Native American, just so you kind of know the kind of demographics of this person. So let me just pause there, because usually what we do is we ask for just some clarifying questions that you may have as a group. And and we usually ask that from our spoke sites with a smaller hub team. I'll start with folks outside the hub team, and then I'll ask for some clarifying questions from our hub team. So anyone who has clarifying questions, go ahead and open your mic and let's ask those now. Or if you're more comfortable chatting, you can do that as well. All right, hearing no clarifying questions from the group as a whole, let me open it up to Glenn and Ashley. Do you guys have any clarifying questions that might be helpful for this person? And we are recording this, so this might be something that we could ask that he could hear or she could hear later.
I just had a couple of questions. I'm just going to make an assumption that this is a 5A school with 750 kiddos, 9-12. There's probably some assistant principals. And I understand this person doesn't want to move communities. And I understand why. They've got kiddos and they've got roots in that community. I feel the same about mine, but I am just making an assumption that those assistant principals in place, there's just not a lot of movement. And they might, be hanging around for a long time. There's just, I guess maybe I answered my own question. Is that?
That's a good question, Ashley, which is what kind of movement do you see? Because I think that's an important part to see. And also, just so you know, to clarify, this person is a teacher coach that works in both a middle school and high school setting. That's why both contexts were mentioned.
Okay.
Well, Glenn, go ahead.
Do we know, has this person been actively seeking a position for several years, or has he or she only tried for 1 year? And
my understanding is this was recent, within the last year or so, finishing a master's program, and has just been looking for openings, trying to do inquiries, but unsure, like, how deep do I inquire? Do I become, quote unquote, for lack of a better word, a little bit harassing in my outreach, or do I just quietly wait and look for an opening?
Okay. And do you know that if this person process, is it just submitting the application online, and is that pretty much the extent of their search process?
My understanding is this person is looking for openings that are posted by districts, but also just by word of mouth, trying to find out from others what positions. I think part of the limitation is not wanting to move, which sometimes means you're limited until something comes open. Ryan, I see a question from you too. I didn't think of this previously, but the coaching role is in athletics, not curriculum instruction, correct? That's yes. Thank you for asking that. So this person is an instructor and also in athletics. Any other clarifying questions? Thank you, Glenn. Ashley, thank you, Ryan, for asking that clarifying question. All right, let's take an opportunity to provide some feedback, because I know this person who's teaching will want to be able to get some access to your feedback as well. And so, Ashley, I'll begin with you. Just what are some things, advice, ideas you would share? I'm sorry, I'm not following protocol. First, we ask for advice from our spokes teams, and then we go to our hub. So anyone in the room, please give an opportunity for advice or feedback that you would provide for somebody that's in a situation like this. Heather gives the suggestion of looking at OSSBA's website for openings, which is a really great place if you're looking for consistent postings. Other suggestions? Thank you, Heather.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I know that this can be a really professionally frustrating place to be in, right? When you have aspirations and you've done a lot of work to try and move toward that goal attainment, and you feel like you're not even getting opportunities, to sit in the room and interview for position. It sounds like the person who submitted this has done some things, one, by maybe reaching out to this group of administrators and making some connections. We know social capital and social networking and professional networking is incredibly valuable in our professional learning and opportunities moving forward. I think it sounds like there's some things that are happening with being a part of the professional learning communities within the school that are going to add some value as a candidate. But I would maybe just continue to lean into that and to maybe look for opportunities to really present and build a portfolio of professional development, like maybe provide some opportunities that they're taking a leadership role, and also expand beyond the site leadership roles and just look for chances to maybe be involved in district committees. If there's a bond issue task force, or if there's something going on where they're going to get a chance to work with strategic planning or goal setting or data review, at a higher level, it just creates opportunities for learning, building their context of what does the work of a school leader really look like, and watching that happen. And then also, again, just continuing that professional networking that happens there. And then I think probably the last suggestion I give is really just trying to find a confidant that can help navigate that frustration, right? Is there someone that they've developed trust with, whether it's their direct supervisor now or someone else in the district, or a colleague in another district that's in an administrative role that can really just talk through some of the challenges that are exhibiting, and maybe take a look at their CV or their resume, or maybe, those types of things. I don't think this is my personal opinion, I don't think it's beneficial to just blanketly send those things to superintendents or to principals. I don't think that really increases your opportunity of being noticed or considered as an applicant. Other people may feel differently, but I know that for myself as a site principal with 3 assistant principals, if I'm not actively pursuing someone, that's really just kind of a distraction for me in my normal work. So it goes into a file in my email that I probably never look at again. So that'd be the feedback I have.
Ryan, thank you so much. That was really helpful feedback. I appreciate that. I do see Cass was able to log in. Welcome, Cass. It's great to see you. We have a smaller hub team this week with Ashley jumping in as a guest hub team member. So thank you for being here. Let me give anyone else from the spoke sites feedback that you would like to give to this aspiring leader.
I was just going to also add, look for other ways to build that leadership and to build that resume up. I know when my husband started, he's a superintendent now. He started out as a district test coordinator. He volunteered to assist the current district test coordinator so that he could get that leadership role kind of started without going outside of his own district or anything first. Just try to get the ball rolling.
Thank you, Heather. Others? All right, I'm going to come back over to our hub team members then. And Ashley, I'm going to start with you. What additional advice would you add?
A couple of things that are just bouncing around in my mind. I'm wondering if this person has had the opportunity to have their principal look at their resume to see what that resume actually looks like and what it's communicating. I know that when I look at resumes, I'll just be honest and confess that sometimes that's a 30-second to 1-minute process. And what is unique and stands out? What sets them apart from other candidates? And, I just would encourage this person to have their supervisor, maybe a couple of supervisors that they trust, to look over their resume for that purpose. I do very much agree with Heather. When I was journeying through my administrative master's program, my principal was very open to me leading special projects for her, or what was required for me as I journeyed through that process. I know as administrators and principals, my list of projects and special things that I want to do for my school is longer than what I can get done. And so if I have somebody wanting to pursue leadership and to gain experience, that's just awesome, because that's going to make our school better. And so I think Heather hits the nail right on the head. Because if you're able to lead a group of people through a new initiative successfully, that's what it's all about. And that is hard work. So I think Heather has a brilliant idea there, and that was something else that was rolling through my mind. I know that when I was jumping into the administrative world, I taught at an elementary school that was about 350 kiddos, and it was predominantly white and had very small minority groups. But I was willing to apply at Capitol Hill Elementary that had 1,200 kids and was very Latino, Hispanic, but I took some specialized training to give me an edge there, because there were only 2 assistant principal jobs open in Oklahoma City at that time. And so the principal that hired me was impressed with some ELL training that I had that she was curious about, and how I was going to be able to support some teachers. So I think you have to be willing to go for it if it's out of your comfort zone, if you really want that leadership opportunity. And then when I was looking for a head principalship, I left my comfort zone of the big city and I went to a K-8 school. And that's a totally different experience. And I am so grateful for that opportunity in that K-8 school, because I got to be the transportation director. I got to be Title I coordinator for the district and special education. And then I quickly realized that I was a city mouse, not a country mouse. But after I had that 3 years of wonderful, invaluable experience, I was a good candidate for a different position because of those opportunities. So I think when you're looking to, you have to sometimes be brave and step out. It's kind of like, how bad do you want it? And how far are you willing to drive for that leadership opportunity? And, you just got to be brave and jump out there. So I think that is something that I wish I'd have the opportunity to visit with this person directly and just but I understand that when you have family, those things are different. And at that time I didn't have children, so I had a lot more time on my hands. But I think looking at the resume and making you stand out on that resume, stand out on that cover letter, is something that can get people's attention in a unique way. And and just being brave and going for it and be willing to think outside of your box, or you have to be willing to wait until that position opens up.
Ashley, thank you so much for that great feedback. Cass, I know you've been in the room for a little bit, and I don't know if I know we sent you the case study ahead of time, but this is an aspiring leader who's just looking for feedback on ideas that he or she may not be considering when trying to find that opening. What would you like to add to this conversation?
Well, when I joined, Ryan was speaking, and I absolutely agree with so many of those things that he said. In fact, that I had made a list of some things that would be important to me, and he touched on many of those. And I came in a little bit into what he was saying, so forgive me if these are things that have already been suggested. But I am so involved in my professional organizations that I could not stress that point. In the meantime, while this person is waiting to find that position or waiting to be chosen, I would absolutely suggest that they become a member of OAESP or OASSP, OMLEA, whichever association is most appropriate, as an associate, and grow their connections, their networking in that manner, because it's been so valuable to me. I began with OAESP when I first got my first principal's position. Thank goodness I had a superintendent who drug me along and said, you're coming to that summer conference. But I can only imagine how beneficial that would have been to me before I had become a principal to make some of those connections. So while that person is waiting or is growing, I suggest that as a great place to start also. And the other things that were touched upon, those leadership roles in your building or even outside of your building. I'm in a small community, so the leadership roles in the community also, just anywhere that your administrator or your school board, your superintendent, those that are hiring, anywhere that they can see that you are stepping out and taking a leadership role. I think that makes a difference and will go a long way. And then finally, I'm just gonna throw this one out there. Become active in social media, participate in Twitter chats, participate in Facebook groups. That's just another avenue where you can grow yourself professionally and make some connections. And like Ashley said, sometimes you just have to be brave and go for it. And you may find a connection to another school. I know families involved here, and I know this person didn't want to leave or didn't want to move from their school, but you may find a great connection that it may be an open door that right now not even being considered. So I'm just going to put that one out there too.
Thank you, Cass, for that great feedback. I appreciate that. And Glenn, I'm going to call on you in just a moment, but before I do, Angela Kwok had made a couple of comments that I missed. One was, Angela, you caught the earlier on, you were talking about just how important it is to write well. And so you said you noticed this person's spelling was good, and those are things you immediately look for when candidates are reaching out to you. So kudos on that. And then Angela also made a suggestion here to just connect with other education communities through, she says, there are many strong connections made while you work side by side developing partnerships. Look at summer opportunities or Oklahoma initiatives. There was a newsletter from Career Tech offering summer learning opportunities. Just different ways that you can connect with like-minded professionals through some of the other offerings happening around Oklahoma, just like Cass mentioned with our associations as well. So thank you for that. Glenn, what other comments or advice would you like to add to this conversation?
All right, thank you, Will. I'd just like to just share kind of my story to my journey into administration. I was teaching in Missouri, grew up in Oklahoma, left Oklahoma because they weren't hiring teachers of the year. I was looking for a job, so I ended up going to Missouri. I spent 8 wonderful years in the state of Missouri in a very small district. And so it was a small district of about 4,000 students or less, but I had opportunities there that I would not have had anywhere else had I been in a large district. I even had a job offer in a suburban Dallas district at the same time that I accepted this job in small town Missouri. And even though the job paid more in Texas, I felt so comfortable that with the job that I went ahead and went to Missouri and got to work on my master's degree. I had to drive an hour and a half one way, 2 times a week, and an hour and a half home, and basically killed a car, for over I think I did it in about 18, 20 months, and finished that master's degree. Then I went to work on my specialist degree, which was they were done in remote sections around the state. But what happened about that time was that universities were offering these remote opportunities to get your master's degree, and everybody was going to get it in administration. And so anytime job openings would come open in the small town south of where I lived, I mean, small town of like 100 people, they had 128 people apply for one principal job. And so it really became a lottery of just getting your name pulled. And but I took opportunities I was the after school program director for my school. So I was teaching all day long, and then I was running after school programs from 3 to 6. I wasn't getting home till almost 7 o'clock at night. And then I was grading papers and doing lesson plans and all that. And then no one wanted to lead summer school in this district. Everybody would just kind of burn out and just didn't want to lead it. And so I had an opportunity to lead summer school and took those leadership opportunities so I could show my leadership skills that I had. And so I was able to build this summer school program in Missouri, where school districts actually got paid twice. They got to count students twice on attendance. And so it was actually a really big moneymaker for districts at that time. And I was running 2,000 students in a summer school program in a month. And so I was doing those kinds of things. I'm putting a book in the chat here. It's called The Proximity Principle, The Proven Strategy That Will Lead to a Career You Love by Ken Coleman, and which is part of the Dave Ramsey group. And in this book, he talks about you have to have a relationship with people in order to get noticed. And so if that means picking up the phone and getting to call somebody, they have to know your name if they're going to take a look at you. When I hired assistant principals several years ago, had a lot of people apply for that job, and the person that I ended up hiring, which I'm never convinced that I'm going to hire somebody just because I know them, but the person I hired, I already had a relationship with because her and I had went through a 15-month professional development program called NISL. It's called NCEE now through the State Department, and so I got to spend 15 months with her and really get to know her and know what kind of skills that she had. And she was working with Tulsa Public at that time, and she actually lived in my town where my school was, and so it was a good fit. I think it's, as I look over my career, and I really had aspirations to become a superintendent or a central office or something like that. So even as a principal, I was the district test coordinator. I was also the professional development coordinator for the district, and I was also the TLE coordinator for the district. So I take on district roles to prepare myself. And it's funny how life happens, because sometimes God throws you a curveball, and you go down a different path that you did not see coming. And so, and I'm talking about that path that I'm on right now, and be able to lead elementary principals across the state and get to work with COSA and just what an awesome opportunity. And every job I've ever had, it has always been about being at the right place at the right time. And one year I applied for so many jobs. I applied for 100 jobs in 1 year and never got one call. But I look back at the jobs that I was applying for, and I look at it now and realize I would not have been happy in those jobs. And I even went on some interviews where they were asking me if I would be willing to do something that I did not agree with. Like one job, it was assistant principal job. They asked me if I would spank children, and I'm like, I will spank my own children. but I was not willing to do that to other kids. And so, it became a question of, am I willing to compromise my beliefs just for the sake of a job? Let me kind of get to the end of my comments here. I agree with what Ashley said. Have someone review your resume. Had a friend of mine several years ago. He was looking for a job, and he wasn't getting a lot of traction. And I said, "Well, bring me your resume. Let me look at it." Well, he actually had a Vita, and so it was like 21 pages long. And I'm like, dude, people don't have time to look at 21 pages. It needs to be 1-2 pages at the max. If they ask for a more detailed resume later, you could always have that ready to provide to them. And not only on this book recommendation, I will also recommend read. Stay current, read as many books as possible. And because if you're ever brought into an interview and they ask you the question, what are you reading right now? Be prepared to answer that. And it should be something that is current. And then I agree with what Cass said, join COSA. Even as a teacher, you can join it as an associate, but attend conferences, attend the OA ESP Midwinter, attend the OA SSP OMLEA conference, attend the summer conference. You get to know people and make those connections there. It was also mentioned in the chat that OSSBA has a site for job openings. Little unknown fact is that COSA also has job sites, a job opening site on our new website. Our old website wasn't very good for that, and that part of the site had actually crashed. But anyway, we do have a new website now, and so that is available there as well. And I'm going to conclude my comments with this, and this is my own personal philosophy, and you can quote me on this. I truly believe that there's only one way through this life, and that is through hard work. And if you're a hard worker, people see that and they will value that, and so they're going to value you as a colleague, as a worker, and as a leader. It is through hard work. So, and I will end there.
Megan, I'm so glad you're recording this. Glenn, that was such valuable feedback. Thank you, everybody, for all of that. And before we transition to our didactic, I just want to say thank you to each of you for the feedback that you've given for this question. And I'm actually going to call on one more person just quickly, because we've heard a lot of feedback from our friends, wonderful feedback from our friends with elementary background. But Ron Sunderland, I see you in the room. You've had a long legacy of secondary education leadership. And I just I'm just curious what additional pieces of advice you might want to add from that secondary level, because you lead a school demographic that fits very closely to what was described here.
Well, most of the stuff that's been said so far is basically what I do. Ashley talked about, how you get to stand out, and you also mentioned the networking. Networking is huge. I mean, both of my assistant principals that I've hired here, I met through one of them I met at the COSA conference sitting on a couch outside of session, and we got to talking, and we ended up going out to dinner that night and just visited. And then the other, and I've known professionally for quite a while, but I think the biggest thing is networking, and never stop learning. Always, like Glenn said, what are you reading now? I ask mine that all the time. And some of them have a good answer, some of them don't. And, like he said, it's got to be current, it's got to be relevant, and something that you can actually apply to a leadership position. So, if I was to say anything, network, get your name out there, network, get to know people, get their ideas, share your ideas, and move on from there.
Ron, thanks for that feedback. And you have such good experience in networking, and also, like Glenn's story, just being willing to step in and do so many different roles to get experience for the thing that you want to do next. I appreciate you logging in today from Woodward, my friend. Well, this wraps up this part of our conversation, and we wanted to take an opportunity for the last part of this session to just talk about I wanted to present some ideas on suggestions for anyone who is interviewing for an education opening. And these are suggestions that I have just put together from conversations that I have had with leaders in every setting. I have had, often I'm asked by aspiring leaders, but also by experienced leaders for feedback on ways that they might better prepare for what they want to do in education. And so let me share my screen here for just a moment. And then let me just provide you guys some feedback. I tried to count one time how many times I have sat through the interviewing experience in the 24 years that I served in schools, and I lost count after 100. So, I mean, it's been over 100 different times I've sat on interview committees or with individuals or with candidates. And what I've discovered is that over time, you begin to get a sense for what to look for in candidates. So if you're interested in like beefing up your own abilities to interview or look for an education opening, I believe this applies not just for aspiring leaders, but also even when you're trying to transition from one leadership position to another. So some of these are things that have already been mentioned. I'm just going to quickly walk through these 10 and so that we can provide this back to anyone who wants a link to this session as well. The first is one that's already been mentioned: update a solid resume. The very first thing that I look at when I receive candidates that I'm looking at for openings, and when I was a principal and was looking for assistant principals specifically, I studied their resume. And if it wasn't solid, it got put to the side. That resume was often their very first opportunity to connect with me. And so it should go without saying that it needs to be concise, without errors. It needs to have a heading with all your contact information. It needs to be pertinent to the position you're looking for. It should list chronologically the experiences that you've had. And if it's possible to limit it to 1 or 2 pages, like Glenn mentioned earlier, then do that, because long resumes are tedious and they're hard to read, and they're usually not necessary for people that are looking for good experience. Number 2, I do suggest, depending on the situation, preemptive emails or calls if there's already a position posted. I don't think it's a good idea to be just reaching out haphazardly, asking people if they have openings. But if you see a place that's posted an opening and you're applying online, it doesn't hurt to send a direct email to the supervisor or person that you think might be the person who's going to be managing that hire, just to do an introduction. If it's a call, rehearse ahead of time, because the last thing you want to do is leave a voicemail that sounds rambling. You want to be able to just concisely say, hey, this is who I am. I'm interested in this position, would love an opportunity to talk more. Here's my contact information. Because I have, in my experience, I have had emails drop in or voicemails drop in, and the person's intriguing enough that I remember them when I'm going through the pile of applicants later. So send a short, friendly email, reach out to that person, make sure it's brief and professional without misspellings. If you choose to reach out by phone, rehearse ahead of time. School leaders want people who are passionate about teaching and leading, not just finding a job. They don't want to hear you sounding desperate for a job. They want to hear someone who's passionate about serving in that opening that's available for them. Number 3, research your prospects. So if you know that there's a specific opening, then do your homework, which means digging into websites, looking at the lay of the land ahead of time, seeing if you know someone who works in the district and asking them for feedback. So when you walk into an interview, you already know some names and faces of people, and you have the context for the place that you're going into. It's not any different than if you were traveling to a different state or country or city. You always look up ahead of time what to expect and where you want to eat. Do the same thing with an interview. Don't go in cold or blind. Make sure you've done your homework. If you're looking at a leadership position as well, you want to know how many staff and teachers there are, how many positions, what curriculum is being covered, so that you're knowledgeable as you step in as well. Number 4, this is something I've actually practiced with leaders, and it can be really uncomfortable, but rehearse. Like, rehearse your introduction. And I always encourage people, rehearse it with a smile, even if that means you have to open a Zoom and like record yourself and then watch what it looks like. Do it. I can't tell you how many times I've been in interviews where that very first question is, tell us a little bit about yourself. Or that someone just starts with a hard question. What is your educational philosophy? But whatever the question you begin with, don't answer it until you've introduced yourself, that you've told people you're thankful for the opportunity to be there. And then watch your gestures. Don't cross your arms or clench your fist. Don't start rambling, because that's often a sign of anxiety. Your ability to appear cool under pressure is something they're looking for in leadership. So show that in the interview. Even though interviews can be anxious, that's why rehearsing ahead of time can be an important way to start the conversation. Number 5, play to your strengths. In other words, don't be afraid to brag. And I know that sounds weird because educators hate to brag, but it's not bragging to talk about legitimate success. And so it's important when you walk into an interview that you connect what your successes in the past have been with what you're going to be able to do in this situation. And I call this showing up with your A game. Just walk in ready to be willing to show that you are capable and willing and competent to manage the task that this position requires. Number 6, anticipate questions ahead of time. Now, this means sometimes studying with friends who've been through interviews too, to find out what possible questions could be asked. And Glenn mentioned this as well either, but often I like to think ahead of time of what would some of the procedure questions be, or difficult questions be, or what questions might they want to know about my own past experiences with extra duties. But if you're asked a question that you weren't prepared for, then take a breath and just think about it before responding. Don't just answer because you feel like it has to be something that you say immediately. Relax, because your goal is to demonstrate that you are a strong communicator and that you can handle situations where you can be clear and concise and give examples just like you would in the classroom or just like you would in a meeting with parents. Number 7, turn your failures into stepping stones. I don't know any educator who's perfect. And sometimes you're asked those questions, what failures have you had or struggles have you had in the past? Just be honest, but use those failures or struggles as an opportunity to explain a lesson you've learned and how you turn that experience into an opportunity to grow. Because every one of us has had those opportunities where we failed in classroom discipline, or we did a bad lesson in teaching, or in leadership, we made the wrong call. And so own those, but talk about how that's helped you grow moving forward so that you're working with more wisdom as you look ahead. Number 8, bring your own questions. Now, I'm just going to say this to anybody in Oklahoma, and really this is nationally right now. People aren't just interviewing you anymore. You're interviewing them. Because right now things are more competitive than they've ever been before with the slim job market. So you should bring your own questions when you step into an interview too, because you should be able to ask them, what qualities are you looking for in this position? How would you describe the culture of this school? How would you describe your leadership style? If I'm going to be working with you, how soon will you be making a decision in this situation? So you come with some questions too, so that you can also be interviewing whether you want this to be the place. I always caution friends of mine to avoid conversations about compensation or pay until someone makes you a job offer. This is not the place to do that when you're stepping into interviews for openings. Number 9, rehearse your closure. This is just like my introduction. I couldn't resist this picture of the guy with the Polaroid. I don't suggest that you take a Polaroid of yourself, but I thought this is a good reminder to sometimes you need to rehearse how you end the meeting, just like you rehearse how you start a meeting. And so take time to make sure that your final impression is a good one. And I always suggest that you wrap up every conversation with some great thank yous, because this took people a lot of sacrifice and time to set up meetings and reach out and talk to you. Repeat the reasons why you think this is a good fit, if you believe it is for you, and then tell them you're looking forward to hearing from them no matter what happens. Even if they don't make you the offer, you need to have made a friendship in this situation. So firm handshakes, smiling, building bridges with people that maybe can become colleagues of yours later. And then last but not least, number 10, follow up with a card or a thoughtful email when you finish, because that makes a big difference. I've had candidates who reached back later with just a quick thank you or a small token like that. And it feels kind and meaningful, and it helps you stand out among other candidates. It also helps you to not burn bridges, because if you're not given that opportunity, it's important that you respond to that with kindness and generosity, and that you make sure they know that you are still available for any future opportunities that might be available. So that's a very quick walkthrough of 10 specific ways that you can plan for an interview. And there's a quick summary on your screen of what those 10 areas would be: a solid resume, preemptive outreach, researching your prospects, rehearsing your intros, playing to your strengths, anticipating questions, turning failures to stepping stones, bringing your own questions, rehearsing closures, and following up with a kind gesture. And so if you don't take anything else away from today's conversation or this spot, remember that the quality of your performance right now is your best interviewing material. However, wherever you are right now, do the best you can there, because your reputation is the most important resume you have. And so don't think about what you want to do as the ultimate. Stay right where you are right now. Do the best that you can, because when leaders reach back to the prospects and the contacts on your resume, that's what we're asking. Would you hire this person again? Is this somebody that's been great for your team? And so that's the reputation that needs to be following you when you're reaching out for these positions. So if you have any questions or other tips that you'd like to ask us, if you're in the room and you would like to ask any follow-up questions, then please do. Or if you are looking at this later and you want to reach out to us, you can too. But what are some additional suggestions or tips that you might find helpful for interviewing, or what are some other questions that you still may have that haven't been addressed? Feel free to open your mics and ask those now if you'd like. And in closure, I know that we had several people already mention the power of association. So I wanted to put up a contact list for you today, because Glenn Absher, who's in the room, leads our Elementary Principals Association, and I lead the middle level and secondary. And COSA is such a great place for resources and professional learning. So reach out to us anytime. Glenn and I often read resumes of people that are looking for help. So we're happy to help you in that regard as well. So I'll stop there. And I just wanted to thank you guys for the opportunity to learn together this week.
All right, thank you, Will. Those are some great tips. Appreciate you sharing those. And so right now, I'd just like to thank you so much for the recommendations and suggestions that you provided. Just a reminder that the OSU Echo team notes will be available after this meeting, as well as any helpful information on best practices or resources we recommended. A reminder that we meet on the first and third Wednesdays of each month, and you can register for upcoming TeleLEAD meetings through the OSU Echo website. Just a program note, Will and I will be in Washington, D.C. The first week in March, along with Ashley and several others, advocating at Capitol Hill. And so we will not be available for the first week of March, and then the third week in March is actually spring break. So we will not be meeting in the month of March, but we will meet back here in April for our last two sessions. We'll meet two more times in April. Thank you for giving your time today, and hope to see you in April. And everybody have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.